Francisco Pizarro, a famous explorer. Francisco Pizarro was born in Trujillo, Spain. His exact birth date is uncertain, but is believed to be sometime in the 1470s. Not much is known about his early life besides the fact that he grew up with very little education. Pizarro's first expeditions began on November 10, 1509, when he sailed to the New World with Alonso de Ojeda on an expedition to Arabia. Later in 1513, he accompanied Vasco Núñez de Balboa in his crossing of the Isthmus of Panama to the Pacific coast. Balboa was governor of Castilla de Oro, Panama at the time. 1 year later, in 1514, Frederius de Villa succeeded Balboa and became the governor. Pizarro became a close associate of de Villa over the next 5 years. When de Villa decided to get rid of Balboa out of distrust, he instructed Pizarro to personally arrest him and bring him to stand trial. Balboa was then beheaded in January 1519 for his loyalty to de Villa. Pizarro was rewarded with positions of mayor and magistrate of the newly founded Panama City. While in Panama, Pizarro heard stories of gold and other riches held by the Incan Empire in South America. In 1524, he formed a partnership with a Spanish priest and a soldier to explore and conquer the south. Diego de Almagro, the soldier, would provide the military and food supplies, while Hernando de Luque, the priest, would be in charge of finances and any other items they would need. Pizarro's first expedition into South America began on September 13, 1524. He headed out to conquer Peru with about 80 men and 40 horses. Almagro was left behind because he was to recruit men, gather more supplies, and join Pizarro later. De Villa, who was governor of Panama at the time, approved the expedition. But even though many preparations were made, Pizarro only made it to Colombia before having to turn back because of bad weather and lack of food and skirmishes with the hostile natives. Almagro, who had joined Pizarro later on, lost an eye to a narrow shot during one of the skirmishes. 2 years after the first very unsuccessful expedition, Pizarro, Almagro, and Luque made preparations to go on a second expedition. In August 1526, after gaining permission from de Villa, they headed out with 160 men, 2 ships, and several horses. Soon after arriving at the Colombian San Juan River, the party separated, with Pizarro staying to explore the new area off the Colombian coast, while Almagro was sent back to Panama to get reinforcements. Pizarro's main pilot, Bartolomeu Ruiz, sailed south and found a raft of natives supervising the area. Also on the raft was a load of textiles, ceramic objects, and pieces of gold and silver and emerald. This finding made the conquistadors hungry for more riches. After capturing some of the natives to serve as interpreters, Ruiz and his crew headed back to the San Juan River and showed Pizarro his findings. Pizarro and the men that stayed back with him were very happy at the good news. Almagro soon returned with about 80 more men and more supplies. Everyone's spirits were renewed with the good turn events that had just happened. Pleased with the findings of Ruiz, Pizarro decided to sail back to the area where Ruiz had previously explored. After a difficult journey due to strong winds and currents, they reached Atacames of the Ecuadorian coast. Pizarro and his men discovered a very large native population there. But due to the native warlike spirit, the conquistadors thought that it would be too dangerous to enter the land, so they decided to turn back. After the confrontation with the natives, it was decided that Pizarro would stay in a safe place while Almagro would return to Panama for reinforcements. The new governor, Pedro de los Rios, rejected Almagro's request for a third expedition. He also ordered 2 ships to go and pick up Pizarro and the others. Pizarro and 13 others refused to leave and stayed on the island. Ruiz also left to help Almagro and Luque gather reinforcements. Pizarro and the 13 men that stayed constructed a boat and sailed 9 miles to a different island, where they remained for 7 months before the arrival of more provisions. Eventually, Rios agreed to let Almagro and Luque go back, but only to pick up Pizarro and the others. When Almagro and Luque met up with Pizarro and the others, they decided to sail farther south to the land recommended by one of the interpreters. When they finally reached the northwest Peruvian Tumbes region, they were greeted by very nice native people and were given gifts and provisions. Pizarro noticed that they were very rich and had lots of gold and other goods. Pizarro and the men then decided to sail further south, but soon turned back. On their trip back, 2 of the men on board decided to stay with the natives and learn more about their culture. After a couple more stops at various places, Pizarro and his men eventually made it back to Panama. After already going to South America 2 separate times, Pizarro and the men wanted to go on one last expedition. Rio simply denied them. Pizarro knew that there was gold and other riches waiting to be found in South America, so he planned with Almagro and Luke and eventually decided to sail back to Spain and gain permission from the king. The king was impressed with the tales of riches and other goods and allowed him to go. Pizarro left the next year with 3 ships, 180 men, and 27 horses. Pizarro landed on the coast near Ecuador in 1532, where some gold, silver, and emeralds were taken and sent back to Almagro in Panama to help recruit troops. Pizarro's goal was to go back to Tumbes where he had success the previous mission, but he was forced to fight the Punian natives, leaving 3 Spaniards dead and around 400 natives dead or wounded. When they did arrive at Tumbes, they found that the places were deserted and destroyed. The chiefs that remained there said that fierce Punian tribes had raided and destroyed the place. Pizarro set up a settlement there and sent Hernando de Soto, a man that joined him earlier, to explore more of the area. Soto returned with an envoy and gifts from the Incan king Atahualpa. Atahualpa also sent an invitation to meet with him. After 2 months of marching, Pizarro and a force of 106 foot soldiers and 62 horsemen arrived in Cajamarca and prepared a meeting with Atahualpa. Atahualpa refused the Spanish presence in his land. He figured that since he had 80,000 soldiers and the Spanish only had around 200 that he could defeat them if a war broke out. Atahualpa was wrong. Pizarro and his men attacked the Incan army there and captured Atahualpa. Even though Atahualpa offered Pizarro a full room of gold and 2 filled with silver, Pizarro had him convinced of killing his brother and plotting against his forces. Atahualpa was then executed. Pizarro's brother Hernando and Soto did not agree with the execution. They saw it as an injustice. By the end of the next year, Pizarro had completed the conquest of Peru. Things started to go downhill after the completion of the conquest. After conquering Peru, Pizarro and Almagro had a disagreement. Both men and their armies fought each other. Almagro was defeated and then executed. This made his son angry. In Lima, Peru, on June 26, 1541, heavily armed supporters of Almagro's son stormed Pizarro's castle. Some of Pizarro's guests stayed and fought, but most fled. While Pizarro was struggling to put on his breastplate, his half-brother and the other defenders were killed. Pizarro killed 2 attackers and ran by a 3rd one. While trying to pull out his sword, he was stabbed in the throat. Pizarro then fell to the ground and was stabbed multiple times. Though Pizarro was killed in the end, his accomplishments live on. He explored parts of Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, and brought down the biggest empire in South America, the Incas. Spain acquired great wealth through his accomplishments. Francisco Pizarro had made a huge impact on history.